Yeah, that explains things a bit. This is why we check audio. All right. Okay. Who knows how long this is going to be? I got a couple articles I want to get through. You know, we might get all the way through them, or we might not. We might have to pick it up again. You know. The audio sounds good. But yeah, like, I got a couple articles trying to work through. I want to make this video on PlayStation 2. You know, because I wanna make a video. I wanna make a video, like a history video. Because I'm tired. I'm tired of people telling me I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to, oh, games are boring, you're just not playing the right games. Like, I haven't been playing games for like 20 something years. I can tell you when it's boring or when it's not boring. Oh, ye child of the winter, because you don't know what the warmth of the summer feels. So, you know, starting with what I believe is the best system made, period, PlayStation 2. I'm just gonna do some research, like, you know, maybe to glean some important information about, you know, what made PlayStation 2 so amazing, you know, and like, you know, what decisions kind of led to that being the case, at least a strong case could be made at the PS2, like one of the best. So, yeah, it's really what this is for. Could be a little boring for some. Could be interesting to some. You know, we're just gonna do it. Hang out, get some work, get some notes in. Notes on PlayStation 2. The purpose is to uncover what brought PS2 around. Was it money or technical advancements? You know, developer interest, you know, some questions like that. Then, history of the PlayStation 2, technical specs, PlayStation 2. Approach. Game lineup, advertisement. All these things can kind of help you understand, you know, where they were coming from with the PlayStation 2. Like, you know, the advertisements that you have can kind of dictate like the outcomes that you're looking for, or what, you know, people should expect from your system. So, you know, like, there's a lot of examples of like old PlayStation 2 advertisements being super obscure, you know, like, you know, open image, new tab. Like, what is this, man? You know, like, that's the thing about the PS2 is it kind of relays that kind of information. Like, actually, let me record this as well. So yeah, like, I mean, PlayStation is interesting because you get to have like these insane advertisements that you wouldn't get these days, you know. Like, you just won't get that. Like, in that advertisement kind of shows you kind of what they were able to get away with as far as like what kind of games you're allowed to design, the art direction you're allowed to take, the risks you're allowed to take. Like, you know, I mean, dude, like, I don't know how many of these are real and not real, but they all kind of capture what the PlayStation 2 ads were like about, you know. It was like, you know, games nowadays kind of about selling units, as many units as possible, or having a live service that you keep on implementing, because microtransactions are really very popular. Like, let me see if I can find an article about it. Like, I mean, just off a small little subset, like, you went from advertisements that, you know, were edgy and artsy and interesting, like, you know, like, look at, and then you went from that to, hey, we need to make as much money as possible. And it's always kind of been the case, like, you want to make as much money as possible. But there was a little bit more to it than that. Like, growth wasn't the thing exactly. It was more so about, yeah, make some money, but give a damn good product and do it for the art of the thing a little bit. So, like, that's kind of, you know, why I think, like, PlayStation 2 and that generation of games is very powerful, very potent, like, as far as, like, what they were trying to do, what they were trying to sell, and how they were trying to sell it. I mean, like, dude, you're not doing this anymore. You're not doing this. I don't know. Like, dude, you don't even know what you're buying with this. Like, like, you know the PlayStation is around that time. You know what the PlayStation is. You know what the PlayStation 2 is, because, you know, it was like one of the most hyped things that ever came out. I remember my next door neighbor, like, the two brothers, and they got a PlayStation 2. And, you know, my family, we weren't broke or anything like that, but, you know, my parents weren't like, yo, we're gonna get you the new system every time something comes out. It's just kind of like bonkers. Like, who's got, like, $300? Yeah, $300. Who's got $300 to spend, like, randomly on a you know, system, and you got 3-4 kids? Like, you know, get real. So, you know, seeing those dudes and they're playing like SmackDown versus Raw or something, like, you know what a PlayStation was. Everybody knew. But these ads, like, what was the outcome? What were they trying to, you know, convey? What were they trying to pull off? So, you know, that kind of shows, like, hey, it's about the art a little bit. Like, when I see advertisements like this, it's about the art a little bit. I mean, some of these might not be, you know, from the time, of course, but, like, you know, they all kind of convey this spirit, you know, of the PlayStation 2. I mean, that's, like, kind of a quick aside. So let's take a little bit of notes around PlayStation 2. From, let's get the link in. All right, let's get some, like, technical stuff down. Technicals of PlayStation 2. Yeah, console, yeah, we know that. Release date. Release date is 2000. 2000, dude. March 4th, 2000, man. What a time, what a time. Cost was, initial cost was $299. We're gonna go with USD because I'm an American. Sony, obviously, developer. It's worldwide. 2,000 games, 2,100 games released. What? Like, what does that even compare to, like, what's the new, is it PS5 now? Like, I you know, get a PC, you don't need to worry about it. How many games does PS5 have? 26. They were released between 2000 and 94,000. So there is quite a bit of PlayStation 5 games. Like, I'm trying to think, like, maybe, how many of these is this exclusive we're talking here? Or is this, like, also, like, oh, there are re-releases of older games that you have? Kind of hard to... 2021. Like, I'm trying to see, like... I mean, hey, I didn't know PlayStation 2 had that many games. I mean, Because it always feels like, especially nowadays, everything kind of feels like there is, like, a lot smaller amount, like, you don't get to see it all. And I don't know how open or small these things are. Or, like, let's just say, I don't know, how accessible these things are, Interesting. Solar Ash. Like, some of these things I have seen before, and they were like masterpieces in and of themselves. Wild Hearts. I don't know, the Xbox Series. 7.5. It's not bad. EA, Omega Force, $70. Yeah. They're not playing with y'all. Making you pay some money for that. The Invincible. Cyberpunk. Underknots. Blah, 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 blah. Moby score. What is the Moby score? The Lord of the Rings Gollum. Like the worst game ever made ever. Yeah, no. Like, maybe it's just because I'm out of the ecosystem now. But, like, it just doesn't feel like it has that many games, You're kind of sold into these very specific corners. And you can hear about a lot of these in passing. Or, you've interacted with some of them. But, like, Alice Gear Aegis, Concerto, Simulatrix. Yeah, like, very specific audience is playing this. And it's kind of, I've never even heard of this, Never even heard of this. But, like, when I was playing PlayStation 2, you would hear of everything. Maybe it was because I was more ingrained into that aspect of things. But, I mean, like, just felt more important when releases were happening on the PS2. And there were a lot more, like, genre-defining bangers out there, But let's keep going. 2,100 games. Wow. They got they have 2,000. They have 2,600 now, which, makes sense. If you have more indie devs, the platform is easier to develop games, it's more accessible. I don't know how accessible it is to get on their platform, but, I guess that allows them to get a lot of games. Let's not go to Wikipedia. Let's go here. Boom. Rumors successor to Sony PlayStation had been surfacing since 1997. How do I want to organize it? Sometimes it's about organizing your thoughts. That's why I kind of write down markdown files. Like, it's about organizing your thoughts so it's easier to recall. Like, sometimes you don't even look back on the notes. It's just more so, this is how I learn. Like, if I just read it, it'll bounce off my brain. Like, it's just not going to stick. Let's not over-categorize. We'll categorize in post. Rumors of the successor. There was rumors of release in 97. 1999, Sony began announcing a new console. They announced it in 1999, officially. Next generation system would use immense storage capacity of the DVD and the raw processing power of the chip. There were major improvements that bolstered or the next generation could use the immense storage of the DVD and raw processing of the chip called the emotion engine and be able to play DVD, movies, audio, CD right out the box. Improvement or major improvements in tech came with it. Like a lot of this is like, dead tech, like DVDs. People even, I'm sure people still got DVDs on deck, but like, came with use of DVDs that allowed for much larger storage capacity, allowed the playing of DVDs. Oops. I do remember using it for that. The emotion image, raw processing power of the emotion engine. Emotion engine. What is the emotion engine? Let's figure out what that is. PlayStation 2 emotion engine. Coming from this article here. Okay, what is the emotion engine here? CPU developed, manufactured by Sony and Toshiba. It was also used in the early PS3. Chip used in PS2 and early PS3. Model sold in Japan and in the use in the PS3 was to allow backwards compatibility. And that's a beautiful thing, man. Compatibility. I can't spell, but who cares? So, like, you can kind of see, like, there's no such thing as backwards compatibility anymore. Like, they're not doing that anymore. So, but I mean, you're allowed to buy games through, like, their store. And if it was on a previous generation and you're able to play it, fine. That's kind of backwards compatibility, but not in the concept that we're thinking. Like, you buy the game once, you own the game, and then you're able to leverage it in the future time. Like, you're able to put it on the newer system, which makes sense. You would think stronger system should be able to play, your older games on it. I'm sure there's some, incompatibility problems that may come with that, but allowing this chip to remain there kind of allows for this. So that's nice. So the ownership of games was still very much a thing. Motion engine consists of 8 separate units. I don't want to completely spend a lot of time on this, but I kind of need to understand what made this important. The motion engine consists of 8 separate units, each performing a specific task integrated onto the same die. These units are a CPU card, 2 vector processing units, 10-channel DMA unit, a memory controller, and an image processor. There are 3 interfaces: the input-output interface, I/O processor, a graphics interface, and a memory interface. Okay. CPU core is tightly coupled with the first GPU to the first together, responsible executing game code, high-level modeling, computation. Okay. Second, VPU is dedicated to geometry transformations and lighting. Okay, so you're separating the functionalities. I'm guessing this will allow for more output. We got an architect. If you If you had access to this before the PlayStation in the 90s, they would have lined you up and shot you somewhere. Are you kidding me? Now it's just on the internet. This is insane. Everything is on the internet. You just gotta like sit down and know what you're looking for. Anyway, CPU core is a two-way scaler. Blah 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 blah. A lot of this doesn't mean anything to me. In addition to a custom instruction set developed by Sony, which operated blah blah. Image processing, external internal data bus, fabrication, packaging. Uses was in the PlayStation 2. The first PlayStation 3 revisions produced also featured the Emotion engine on the motherboard, which gave backward compatibility. However, second revisions lacked a physical. Yeah, this is the lower cost. Yeah, I had a feeling. Performing all of its functions using software emulation. Oh, so they replaced it with emulation. In later releases, they replaced the actual CPU with emulation. So they still have the ability to, you know, run these previous games. Just, you know, they just don't want to do that. I mean, obviously you can make a lot more money if you just resell this. That's my anti-consumer brain working. It was a marketing gimmick. Playing like I'm 5. What was the Emotion image in the PS2? Why did developers not just make better ones at the time, as time went on? I've heard people swooning at how easy the PS2 was to work with, spitting at how difficult the PS3 was to work with. Why didn't they just upgrade the magical processor and keep everyone happy? I mean, this is Reddit, so you know these are just opinions, but let's these are people who care about this a little bit more deeper, have some more exposure, you would think. The Emotion engine wasn't just a single processor, it was 8 different components. Tech evolved, many external components were either directly integrated into the CPUs, and others were integrated into GPUs. Easier and more economical, it makes sense. Modern consoles are now much more similar to your average desktop PC, which is true, than they are to your old one. Yes. Emotion engine was a marketing gimmick name for a graphics processor. Early on, they literally said it synthesized emotion. Showed a demo of a face smiling. Facial animation was new. Yeah, facial animation was new. See, this is why. I need to figure out why, you know. This is from a Reddit post. Needs confirmation. This is like a nice little breadcrumb, too. Facial animation. The Emotion engine was a marketing gimmick. Marketing gimmick. It was new technology that allowed game devs to simulate motion. That was, you know, and that was important in the past. Like, I remember when sweat, you being able to see the sweat, or like you being able to see maintain damage, like, was a big deal. So like, this was when, you know, nowadays, like, we overdo it. Like, there's a billion, million, fulfillion pixels, and you get to simulate, you know, armor damage, and if you're driving a car damage, you know, blood. You know, it's a lot more dynamic these days. It's a lot more easy to allocate, and it's not crazy on processing. But like in the past, that was a big deal. Like destruction of environments. Like these things kind of made a video game special in the past. Like nowadays, everything has destruction, everything has that, so it's kind of boring. But like in the past, like it was such a big deal, and it added to the game's functionality a lot of the time. You know, which is pretty darn cool. But nowadays, it's like whatever. Like, dude, oh, you got destructible environments, so what? It's like baseline now for certain, you know, levels of game development. Simulated motions wasn't the norm. The norm. Bada boom, bada bing. There's no going backwards on that. Computers aren't getting much faster, so we need more of them in parallel. On the other hand, tools like Unity and Unreal have development much easier for anyone who isn't writing their own engine. It's honestly easier than ever to make their own games, except the very biggest of them. Yeah. You cannot make a car by breeding a better horse. Unfortunately, a motion engine wasn't magical. It was a physical thing with its own drawbacks. Yes. Motion engine in PS2 has 3 processing cores, 1 CPU, 2 vector cell processors. PS3 has 8. Yeah. Bang. A big leap. This alone makes it completely unequal. Managing 7 processors will never be as simple as managing just 2. On the other hand, 2 processors will never match the calculating power of 7. PS2, one of the vector units directly connected to the graphics chip. So you would naturally load your rendered program there and never touch it again. The other is paired with the CPU, so you can more easily control it. Even then, many games do not use CPU paired VU to its full potential. PS3 VUs are more general purpose and do not have predefined functions, so it's not hardwired to perform a certain tasks. Having 7 units also poses another problem. You now at the speed limit of your central connection bus. If several units want to request data from somewhere, only one of them can, and the others have to wait. Minimize that waiting is a difficult task. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. So it's like it was huge. Like, look at this. This is insane. Was the emotion engine overhyped?
I am running to be president of the United
Chill
States,
out,
and
Kamala.
I need you with me
We're
in
busy.
this fight. So I am
got
asking you
work
to
to do.
pitch in to help me defeat Donald Trump. We have a lot of work to do, and just about 100 days.
When I go back and think about console launch,
But chill out. Chill out, music. Chill out, Yoshida.
it's hard to imagine any more hype leading up to a launch than the Sony PlayStation 2. The
Just turn
Nintendo
this.
64 is certainly up there, with its silicon graphics in the living room and bringing the arcade to the home on the Nintendo Ultra 64
Turn it to
nonsense.
its own section.
But the PS2, that was something else. When it released in 2000, it took the world by storm. It promised the future of video games. Many of us saw the power of what the PlayStation 2 could do thanks to the many tech demos that we saw in 1999. These demos all ran in real time, and the thing that really stood out for me was the graphics and fidelity was a massive step up from the PlayStation 1. In fact, its leap represents the single highest graphical jump from any one console generation to another. The
Like, come on. So, like, the PlayStation 2 emotion engine, like, I don't remember this necessarily being sold. I just remember the PlayStation 2. I was really young at the time. But, like, this engine, the PlayStation 2 itself, really represented something in a moment in time. Like, and I don't think we can recapture it anymore at this point. I think we're jaded. We have too much power. We got too much energy. There's too many ways to do things. And, like, essentially, game development was like, okay, we're working in a very tiny box. We're working with so many limitations. We need to find ways to make this work, and convey our artistic ideas, convey our interactive artistic ideas. But, like, the PlayStation, Nintendo 64 brought us 3D, right? I believe so. I have to check it up, but N64 brought us 3D. Then the next generation, like, you get PlayStation 1 and you're able to play, or PSX, I think it's called. You get to have access to, 3D, Tekken, all those different things. But, like, PlayStation 2, it felt different. Like, the games that you were seeing were like face melters, like, that whole generation, PlayStation 2, GameCube, Xbox. I'm just going to keep it at the PlayStation 2. But, like, from PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64, those were a big deal. from that to PlayStation 2 era, that was like, one small step for mankind, the second step to freaking Neon Galaxy 6. It was insane.
PS2 was the total package, right down to the futuristic boot-up startup sequence and the distinct purple hue color of its discs. And the hardware supported DVDs for both games and movies. And of course, it was fully backward compatible with PlayStation 1 games. But at the top of the PlayStation 2 hype train was the new custom chip, dubbed a motion engine. This chip was found inside every PS2 and is the heart of the system. And even if you are not someone who's technically minded, the chances are you've probably heard the name Emotion Engine before. And this is because Sony marketed the Emotion Engine in such a way that made you feel like you were stepping into a whole new world.
Dude.
A true next generation of gaming hardware that went beyond traditional computing. And for developers, the Emotion Engine boasted the ability to accurately model all manner of physics and world systems. All of a sudden, things like procedural world generation, realistic facial features, water effects, hair simulations, soft shadows were all possible thanks to the brand new Emotion Engine chip. This technology was able to make games more realistic.
Dude, like, come on. Like, let me make sure. I like seeing weird's going on. But anyway, like, just from hearing this, like, immediately you can kind of see what the Emotion Engine kind of brought immediately into gaming and the capabilities that you were able to achieve. In the past, you weren't able to simulate procedural generation. Like, come on. We didn't have that before the PlayStation 2. Like, soft shadows, like, you can't convey certain ideas, can't convey certain, like, graphical feats of work without doing some tricks to get it to happen. Like, now it's kind of built in. Like, come on. I mean, nowadays you get water physics, you get all these different things right out the box. Like, it's free, it's easy. Well, dude, this was huge when this came out at first. Huge.
And varied, and this level of performance in real time is what Sony calls it emotion synthesis. This single chip would be responsible for this push to realistic 3D worlds, better physics, and simulations. However, for all this to be achievable at its core, the Emotion Engine is not one chip. It actually combines a MIPS CPU clocked at 294 MHz with two very important additional coprocessors and various other.
Brayden has amazed me. He's so strong.
You hear about cancer, but you don't ever think.
Holy smokes! Let's get back to PlayStation 2.
Memory and interfaces.
Dark.
In short, extracting the very best out of the Emotion Engine required all these systems to be running in parallel with little to no stalling, and it all.
Let's make sure we're capturing some of this as well. So it brought innovations such as air physics, water physics, procedural generation, soft lighting. Crazy. Anyway, continuing.
It required a very skilled programmer. Sony would market the Emotion Engine with the implication that they had something that the competition didn't. The Sega Dreamcast was initially the PS2's main rival.
Let's be real, all right? I wanted one of these suckers back in the day, but I already had the PlayStation 2, I already had the GameCube, and I think we went with the Xbox. Xbox I think was the last one we got. Dreamcast sucked, all right? Like, I'm sure it has some games on there, and it did have some like nice games. Jet Set Radio, they brought you to see Crazy Taxi there, but bro, just get yourself one of those three. Dreamcast, as you can see, Sega's relegated to making Sonic games for the rest of their life. More power to them, but let's get real. They got spanked in this. They got spanked in this generation.
And then the Microsoft Xbox, Nintendo GameCube would arrive a year later in 2001. But many were left feeling disappointed at the launch of the PS2. Sure, there were some good games here. My personal favorite was Tekken Tag Team. Others would enjoy games like SSX and of course Ridge Racer 5. But the main issue here was the games initially didn't seem to be any better than what we saw on the Dreamcast. In fact, many would say they were worse. The Dreamcast was a true games console, with many games being at arcade perfection or near it. And of course, we have to talk about Shenmue. In 1999, the action-adventure title featured environmental details, numerous interactive
they
objects,
were going hard.
a full
They were
day-and-night
going hard.
system, variable weather effects, NPC characters, and a really awesome assortment of
I was talking smack, but them boys was going hard off the rip. But like, as you can see, it did not last forever.
Sega arcade minigames. And people would start to question Sony's reputation and marketing around the Emotion Engine. Can it really do anything that the Dreamcast hasn't already done before it? And what about the up-and-coming GameCube and Xbox hardware launches? Was it a case of Sony overhyping the hardware just to sell more consoles? Or was the Emotion Engine a real thing that could do everything that it was advertised to do? The answer is yes, but getting to that stage would take some blood, sweat and tears. At this point, it's easy to write off the PS2 as the weakest of all the 6th generation consoles, but I think that this is subjective, and in the right hands, the PlayStation 2 could outperform any other console at the time. When Sony launched the PS2 in 2000, the first year was developers mostly coming to terms with the hardware. This would be a paradigm shift in how traditional computation development was done. In order to take advantage of the PS2, the developer needed to think differently, think in parallel, running many tasks at once, streaming data around the bus, and minimizing stalls. The PS2 was designed to be remarkably efficient at handling some pretty complex tasks without relying on traditional methods of data processing. We said earlier that the Emotion Engine was a single chip on the surface, but inside it had additional co-processors, and these co-processors would be the key to untapping the massive performance that the PS2 could offer. While the main chip ran MIPS at its core, the secret weapon of the Emotion Engine were the two coprocessor vector units VU0 and VU1. These vector units, while similar, had different tasks. VU0, for example, would handle geometry transformations, matrix and vector-based calculations, including setting up projections and multiplications. Due to its simmed parallel processing, it was a much better option than the traditional CPU. VU1 was designed to run independently and in parallel from the main CPU.
Parallel
It handles
processing.
3D vertex processing and lighting, and by taking advantage of both vector units in this fashion, with fast optimized code, it's possible for the vector units to generate up to 66 million polygons per second, and if you apply fog and lighting, this number is halved to about 36 million. But according to the Micro Design Report from 1999, this was still around 16 times faster than a Pentium 3 at 500 MHz. The main job of the Emotion Engine was to take all the graphics data needed to render a frame, known as display lists, and pass them to the GS, or the graphic synthesizer chip, which in turn handles the rendering. The GS chip has an insanely fast fill rate of about 1.2 gigapixels per second, and the vector units in turn represented an early look of what we would consider to be vertex shaders in modern times. But to keep these vector units fed,
Like, dude, like, MGS2 was mind blowing. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't know. I don't even know how to convey this to you. Like, what you're looking at is magic in real time. Like, that leap from, like, this is MGS2, but that leap from that to Metal Gear Solid 1, like, dude, let's just take a look. Just skip through real quick.
What are you talking about?
Like, look at
The
that.
terrorists are threatening the White House. They say if they don't accede to their demands, they'll launch a nuclear weapon.
Sweet Jesus.
Is it possible?
They could launch a nuke.
How do they plan to launch? I thought
Like, look at this is what it looked like in the PlayStation 1, and then it went from that
handles the
to
rendering.
this.
The GS chip has an insanely fast fill rate of about 1.2 gigapixels per second.
How is
and
it
the
even
vector units in turn
possible?
represented an early look of what we would consider to be vertex shaders in modern times. But to keep these vector units fed required some precision. And the PlayStation 2 Emotion Engine had arguably the most important chip, known as the DMA controller, or DMAC, which offered developers
Like, dude, come on. Come on. No, come on. First, we're going to start this. I feel like I got too many processes running for some reason. This is a little slow. Shouldn't be. That's why I scan my computer. But like, dude, you went from this.
Place was just for keeping the dismantled war.
You know, the frames aren't even keeping up. Which this is a feat in and of itself. At the time, this is a big feat. To like the most shaded, highly active. That game. This
and the vector units in turn represent
more like this is closer to the more modern systems, like than anything I've seen. Like this is way in the past. This is way in the future. This was like a mark, a point in time, for real. Like a point in time where the PlayStation kind of showed its ability to kind of pop off. Look how soft the lighting is, dude. Come on.
An early look of what we would consider
Rain
to
effects,
be vertex
everything.
shaders in modern times. But to keep these vector units fed required some precision.
Like it was a big deal to walk around in Metal Gear Solid 1 and then have your footsteps be behind you, like in the snow. Like that was like, wow, like, whoa. But this.
And the PlayStation 2.
This happened like, you know, like a few years after I got done playing Metal Gear Solid. I was a little young and I didn't understand how to beat it. You know, they had all these fancy, wonky ways of you know, playing it. But like, dude, come on. Like, it's out of this world. It's out of this world how night and day those two systems are. Like, it's crazy.
Motion Engine had arguably the most important chip known as the DMA controller or DMAC, which offered developers a smart way to move data to the GS with 3 different pathways to get there. So for example, during code execution, the vector unit could be generating vertex data while at the same time texture data could be sent to the VRAM via the DMAC. This could all be done at the
How many times will you keep applying to jobs until you realize you won't get a 6-figure job as a software developer?
They love ads. Holy
time
crap.
to maximize the PS2's bandwidth.
Hope you get
One of
some
the
real
more
money off
interesting
you, bro.
demos that I remember was known as V-Universe. The objective here was to create a graphically interesting demo using only the 16 kilobytes of program memory and the 16 kilobytes of data memory of the PlayStation 2's VU1 vector processing chip. And this is the result. It's quite remarkable. Sony would frequently host competitions to see what developers could do with only the use of the VU1 chip, and some of these demos are amazing. By late 2001, developers started to get more experience in understanding the Motion Engine architecture and really started to show off the power of the PlayStation 2. And there are a few interesting examples of how developers took advantage of them. The first is Silent Hill 2,
Holy crap.
arguably the very best game in the series. It took the original PS1 version, which used fog to not only create the suspense and the mood for the game, but more importantly, used it to hide technical issues with rendering 3D on the PlayStation 1.
Wow.
But on the PlayStation 2, Silent Hill 2, the fog was used in a completely different way, applying many alpha textures and took advantage of the vector units and the high fill rate to create one of the most unique fog layers that's instantly recognized if you're a survival horror game fan. It also featured dynamic real-time lighting and soft shadows, and these features sound pretty trivial in today's age of consoles, but the PS2 at the time was the only system really capable of pulling off these effects. The original Xbox port of Silent Hill 2, while it is a port and very good, the fog effect has been reduced. It's simply just not the same. And if you side by side this in comparison, if you stand in the same spot, you can see exactly what I'm talking about.
Whoa.
And while the original Xbox had a more powerful GPU and a faster overall raw performance, porting some of these VU effects to DirectX 8, which was the supported version at the time on the original Xboxes, meant that some sacrifices had to be made.
Like, dude, okay, so that kind of lends to the point, like, I made way back in the beginning of the stream. Like, they had to be creative. Those limitations that you see and that you're dealing with when developing, you know, for their systems, that's where their creativity shined. You had to make it work. You only have so much processing power. You only can do so many operations. Like, that to me is what kind of brought out the best in video gaming. Like, your ability to problem solve, your ability to add little technical tricks, little funny things, like they said, using the mist and the fog. This is talking about the PlayStation 1 version of Silent Hill. using the fog to kind of hide the more technical rendering issues that they were dealing with at long distances. Like using that to kind of convey, one, to ship out a working product that people would like to buy, but two, they use that limitation to convey the more horror aspect of the game. So like we're seeing when they brought it to the PlayStation 2, now they had, well, one, you had to learn how to use the system. So that limitation was you need to figure out how to work with these processors in the right ways to make it shine, really. Now that you see with the PS2, they have the creativity to think about, oh, this fog creates a certain atmosphere. This pushes this horror angle. But now they may not have these same technical issues. So it just boosts the creativity, as opposed to like kind of nowadays, it's all given to you. So if it's all given to you, you have insane amounts of power, you can render anything you want, really, if your system's hard enough. Like, everything is kind of variable, but if you have a decent GPU and, a little bit of technical know-how, not a little bit, a decent amount of technical know-how, you can pretty much produce anything. And that's kind of why I feel like everything's a little boring. Like, if I give someone, let's just say, like, think of it like, you have a coloring book and then you have another person who has an empty book. Like, I'm going to venture to guess the people who have the constraints of the coloring book is going to have an easier time making a more coherent, more like a better looking piece of art, because they already have lines to work within and they have the abilities to kind of shade how they see fit inside of it. But like someone with just an open book, like, create whatever you want, you have full freedom, you create the hard lines, you create the structure, and you get to fill it yourself. Chances are, unless you're really skilled, you're not going to be able to pull that off at a high level of skill, like a high level of execution. So, that's kind of what my thinking is. Like, the limitations offered, it created the greatness, really. I think the limitations created that creative thought, that kind of bolstered the titles to the next level. And you're seeing the beginning of all your franchise favorites from this generation onwards. Like, yeah, Mario exists and all that type of stuff. Mario 64 started early. Super Smash Brothers, Nintendo has their own little beast of their own. But like, you see your Silent Hills. Resident Evil took a new shine, like with the GameCube release of Resident Evil 4. Dynasty Warriors changed for the better. GTA changed for the better. Like, come on, get real. Like, PlayStation 2, that generation, it marked the beginning of what modern gaming is now.
Silent Hill 3 is a clear step up in visuals from its predecessor, and it absolutely shows. Textures have been improved significantly, and many believe that Silent Hill 3 is one of the best looking PlayStation 2 games on the hardware. And I'm not one to disagree, it's a technical masterpiece. Polygon counts were increased over the original, but what's striking about Silent Hill 3 is its improved texture resolution. Take for example this model of Douglas. It uses around 8700 polygons and detailed textures, and it looks absolutely fantastic. Not only this, many effects in the game were done years before programmable shaders were standard, and this was all thanks to the power of the Emotion Engine's vector units.
Before programmable shaders. They're doing this before shaders, like programmable shaders. I can barely cut. I don't know what I'm reading when I'm looking at shaders. I need to do a lot more work with that. When I develop games, I'm trying to get it released so it stays in the 2D realm. And I'm trying to keep it like kind of decent. It might be boring, it might be very limited as an experience, but like as a single developer, I want to kind of create something that, is I can finish. Like, I want to finish the projects and then see if I can build them into a more fun state as I go. But like doing this before you can program shaders, and I don't even touch shaders like that. Like, come on, dude. Like, this is out of control.
Early implementation of bump mapping. As the light source hits the floor, you can see that the shadows accurately reflect off the ground tiles. As Heather moves around, what is actually happening here is that the ground geometry is drawn twice, with the second pass slightly offsetting the ground texture from the direction of the light source. Then a blending pass is done to subtract color from the frame buffer to pull off this very realistic effect. Because the PlayStation 2's graphics synthesizer has such an insane fill rate, developers took advantage of this, and the PlayStation 2 holds the record for the most number of games that target 60 frames per second. God of War 2 is another technical showcase of the
God of
PlayStation 2's
War!
motion
God
engine.
of War
It
is
released
part of
late in
this.
the PlayStation 2's life cycle, and Santa Monica Studio were locked in on how to get the very best out of the hardware.
Oh my
Its silky
goodness.
smooth gameplay coupled with high-resolution texture work with many enemies and particles on screen at once, running at a locked 60 frames per second, was not a fluke.
They got 60 frames? A lot of this, and this is kind of like what lends me to saying like games kind of suck now. You know, they just don't have this. You don't have to work this hard to get this. Like 60 frames is a given. Really, you're a piece of garbage if you're not running at 120. But like 60 frames, like with the limitations they had at the like, I mean that's baffling to me. And these type of titles, like. These were the most fun versions of these titles. They were fresh. This was all fresh.
But how does a game manage to look so good and never drop a single frame? The game uses a fixed camera system that moves on a rail depending on where you are in the level, which means that it focuses on only what's on screen at all times and streaming in predefined geometry data as Kratos moves around the level, and the effect works incredibly well.
Like I said, again, the limitations. They had a concept, hey, we want to target 60 frames. We want to make a very seamless and fun gaming experience. You know what we should do? We got to solutionize. It's kind of like what Resident Evil did, you know. We want to have a horror vibe. You know, let's have the controls be a little weird and have a fixed camera state, you know. That should lend to the horror vibe. It changed later on, but like this fixed camera state allows them to process better, allows them to stream in data, feed data better. They're able to produce a beast of a product. You know, it's kind of like you know, you're in a movie. Like you have the movie, you have the camera on the rails, and you have a set, and you're gonna play the action in the set instead of the camera being over your shoulder and like you're existing in a world. It was like you're existing in a movie.
But the vector units weren't only used for particle and interesting post-processing effects either, because the PlayStation...
You might think you know...
Another ad, dude.
They have
You're
leveled
sick freaks. It's all garbage.
PlayStation 2 only had
like,
a small amount of VRAM.
Listen, man.
Developers were challenged to innovate in how games could be designed.
Listen, man. Ads are cool and all, but like, I don't care about any of this stuff. I don't know what a bespoke post is, but I don't want a Kodiak grizzly bear head in a bowl that incense smoke falls over. I could care less about that. I know it's just crap you want me to spend money on, but like, to make it crap I want to buy anyway.
Streaming data in real time would now be possible. Traditionally, level data is loaded in statically and fit within the bounds of system memory and VRAM. Developers had to make sacrifices to load in as much data as possible and separating gameplay using loading screens, which would unload old level data and bring in new level data as needed. But thanks to the powerful DMAC chip, streaming technology in several PlayStation 2 games were considered groundbreaking at the time. For me personally, I remember the first time I played GTA 3 on the PS2. Graphically, it didn't look particularly amazing. That would come later with San Andreas. But one thing that was apparent was that Rockstar knew how to program the PlayStation 2. The entire overland map of Los Santos is streamed in real time, taking full advantage of the vector units with no loading. Jak and Daxter, the Precursor's legacy.
You see what I'm saying? It started everything. GTA is a billion-dollar franchise. Like, PlayStation 2, it went from this top-down thing, arcade shooting thing, chaos simulator, to your 3D, and they actually figured out how to procedurally generate the map as you're driving through it, eliminating a lot of load screens. Bro, this is a face melter.
Is a title that's often credited as the first,
another amazing
one of the very first games to have no loading screens, and this is entirely
true.
Didn't
have load screens?
If you play the game from start to finish, you'll never experience a single loading.
I didn't know that.
Once
I played this too.
The entire game, you can run from the very start at Sentinel Beach right until the final stage at the Citadel without a single loading screen in sight. Metal Gear Solid 2 is one of the earliest games I remember that completely blew me away in its presentation. It was a clear generational leap in technology from the PS1 game, and again, thanks to the high fill rate of the hardware, meant that we saw some incredible, for the time, real-time cutscenes and effects. The entire game is a cinematic showcase, featuring real-time dynamic and self-shadows.
Wow.
And of course, the rain effect on the tanker level is one of the most notoriously difficult things to replicate on anything other than original PS2 hardware, at least for many, many years. On the PS2, the effect is effortlessly rendering at 60 frames per second. On the Xbox port of MGS2, with an even more powerful GPU, it simply can't keep up, and the frame rate is reduced to 30 FPS. Metal Gear Solid 2 also features some impressive motion blur and depth of field, alpha blended textures, reflections, and even a physics system, and the game was all about interactivity, and it eclipsed what any other game was capable of doing at the time.
Dude, like I'm telling you, like MGS2 really, it was something like these games that you're like seeing in this video, every single one of them are something special, and they're leaving out like a whole large library. Like I said, like there's 2,700 games on PlayStation 5 right now, but none of them have this impact. Like these felt like nukes, mini nukes every time, and like just imagine being a kid and never seeing stuff like this before, and then all of a sudden, every new game that came out felt like a new, like just the new generation. Imagine someone inventing bread every few months, every few months. And then like all around those few months of releases, they were dropping games, like especially because you had the little Blockbuster card, you can rent games. You can rent games, and give them back and rent another and give them back. You're able to like try so many different games. You're allowed to explore, and like I feel like this kind of showcases it a bit. Like this system was the beginning, the inception of a lot of not just like processing and techniques and all that, but like really high level execution of code. And like, dude, you would pick up random titles and you would be able to have insane fun. No, there's some garbage in it. There's some garbage in there. Like there's some really terrible PlayStation. I'll try to find a list of them, at some point, like the worst PlayStation games I've ever played. But like through those valley moments, you had games like this, like just genre defining, industry defining. Wow. You destroy the light. Look at him. Yeah, no light. Yeah, that was correct.
One of the games that perhaps went beyond what was considered possible on the PlayStation 2 undoubtedly is Shadow of the Colossus. The game brought some new rendering techniques to the PS2, including simulated high dynamic lighting, realistic fur simulation, smooth animations. The horse animation, for example, is very realistic and lifelike. The game also comes with two different motion blur systems, both on the scenery itself and as well as the character when it's performing its animations. There's also a very nice soft shadow implementation in the game. But of course, the Colossi fur effect is possibly one of the most unique rendering techniques on the PlayStation 2. At a high level, it's combining 6 or more multiple texture layers with similar texture geometry duplicated multiple times to give off the effect. The game uses clever use of alpha blending and vertex lighting to simulate the color of the fur. Now, if you want a deep dive on how the fur rendering was done in the game in more detail, I will leave a link to Lena Piquet's excellent technical background in the description below.
So checking that out.
Also features a very interesting level of detail implementation that would bring in new geometry as the world got closer to the player. And thanks to the high bandwidth and fill rate of the PlayStation 2, once again, the game features a streaming implementation with zero pausing. It's possible to ride around the complete vast landscape of the entire world and never have a single load. The game,
like, again, this is another one. Like, hey, Breath of the Wild, this is your grandpa. Legend of Zelda, when you took on that Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, a lot of the systems were made by this. Like, dude, it's so insane. Like, all one generation. Like, you can't tell me. You
was
can't.
criticized for pushing
You
the hardware
can't. You
perhaps
can't
too
tell me
much
this
and
isn't the
suffering
best.
in its performance, but the game to me never feels unplayable. Shadow of the Colossus is a true masterpiece and a swan song for the PS2 itself, and I do recommend you check it out if you haven't played the game before.
Please do.
Either the original game on the PlayStation 2, perhaps via emulation, or the PS3 or even PS4 remasters by Bluepoint. Of course, the charm and vision of the original game is lost on those remakes, but any version of Shadow of the Colossus that you try, you'll have an amazing experience, and I definitely recommend it.
Such an amazing game.
So in conclusion, after a slow start, the Emotion Engine with its vector units was an amazing solution to solve big problems at the time, increasing the number of polygons on screen to create realistic environments and characters. And the PlayStation 2 wouldn't have been the same without it. It's the soul of the hardware, and while it wasn't perfect, its lack of anti-aliasing, for example, is one of the main drawbacks. It brought games to a new generation, and while the Xbox and GameCube were on paper more powerful than the PlayStation 2, the hardware really shined when the experiences were built exclusively for the PS2. So with that all said, was the Emotion Engine overhyped? Definitely not. Once developers knew how to program on it, and after a slow start, it would truly be a next generation breakthrough. The problem is, there's just more than one way to get the job done. The Xbox used brute force to often eclipse the PS2 in terms of performance. It didn't have vector units, but it did have a fast CPU, GPU, and a built-in hard drive.
I am running to be president of the United
Kamala,
States, and I need
get in the
you
way.
with me in this fight.
Get out of my way.
So I am
Get out of
asking
my
you-
way. You just changed the video on me? I didn't want that to
When I go
happen.
back and think about console
That's why Kamala got in the way. I think it's because I'm recording at the same time is causing like some stuff. But yeah, like basically, I didn't know that the PlayStation 2 was weaker than the GameCube. That's hilarious, by the way. Never in a million years did I think after seeing all this, because I'm trying to remember the GameCube, they had some like real technically, powerful moments inside their catalog. It just didn't match what the PS2 was doing. Like, maybe it was the titles, maybe it was the art direction, but like, I had no clue that the GameCube was stronger than the PlayStation 2. I can't wait to do some research in the GameCube, but like, the PlayStation 2 just felt like this open world, this open box of just endless possibility for real. And like, I guess it was that, again, they have the limitations. They already listed the limitations out. Since it's weaker than the GameCube, I mean, dude, like those limitations made them work crazy hard on producing something insane. So no, I'm really a big fan of this.
knew how to program on it, and after a slow start, it would truly be a next generation breakthrough. The problem is, there's just more than one way to get the job done. The Xbox used brute force to often eclipse the PS2 in terms of performance. It didn't have vector units, but it did have a fast CPU, GPU, and a built-in hard drive for fast streaming, for example. But let me know your thoughts about the PlayStation 2 and the Emotion Engine hype in the comments below. And let me know if there was a game that I didn't cover in this episode that comes to mind being something that blew you away back in the day. Of course, there are many more examples that I haven't covered in this episode, but I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say in the comments below. But we are going to leave it here for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you did like it, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye for now.
Yeah, dude.
Nonsense.
Yeah. So that's the Emotion Engine. And that was a dang darn long aside from me writing stuff down. It's totally fine. That was kind of the point of this exercise. The Emotion Engine, like what made the PlayStation 2 so special? When I get back, if you can see the ad, look at the ads, bro. Like, come on, man. We're gonna finish up the article in the next stream. I have to go to bed. I got some stuff I have to do in the morning tomorrow. But yeah, like we got a few notes. We kind of got a better idea of like kind of how special the moment was like when they released this. Kind of the comparison between PlayStation 1 with the Metal Gear Solid reference, like MGS1, MGS2. Like those two were very different, like just leaps and bounds. You got to see the beginning of a lot of what we play today was started around that generation. Like not all of it was centered around PlayStation, but like again, like some of the biggest stuff, like Metal Gear Solid, Grand Theft Auto, Silent Hill, like those things kind of came from God of War. Those things came from the PlayStation 2, like in space. We're not even talking about like Prince of Persia and all these other things. Yeah, man, the emotion shit, pretty darn sick. Did not know anything about this, like as far as technical stuff. That's why we're doing the research. So yeah, I think I'm gonna do a video talking, like, kind of reacting to that, a reaction video, because I don't really do a lot of those. People like those. Get that edited up, and get the right links to the right video, because I want to credit right people. I'm gonna kind of start from here again. Kind of grab what I didn't grab here, kind of move on to the Wikipedia article. Kind of capturing some of the cultural moments, because I want to capture some of the cultural moments around it, because we kind of understand what makes the PS2 technically sound, what makes the PS2 technical in its implementation, on why it's special. But let's kind of get the cultural importance of it. So maybe the games, maybe the advertisements some more, because that was interesting. Some of the events that kind of went around, the PlayStation 2. Yeah, I think this is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to create a bunch of fun videos. It's not going to be Overwatch 2. I'm gonna still play those. I'm still drop some Overwatch 2 content here and there. But I think it's fun. I want to try some new stuff. Why not? It's not like I'm monetized or anything. So, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna lose? Let's try some things. All right, y'all. There's a few people who dropped in every once in a while. I'm gonna keep doing these, so hopefully you guys come back. If you're watching the VOD, hit the like button, hit the sub, hit the bell. Make sure you catch me the next time around. And thank you